School is out, and summer break has begun. Being a senior in high school means that I have to get a job. I was looking through newspapers and online websites, and I was really struggling to find a part-time job. I finally went to the mall that was no more than a mile from my house, and in that mall there are stores like Justice, Kohl's, Macy's, and even a Chuck E. Cheese. The latter of which is where I decided to go to pick up a job application. I walked in, and immediately the smell of rotting food and sweat filled my nose. I cringed at the sight of a moldy pizza under the tables and chairs in one of the dining rooms. A boy of about 16 with an acne-ridden face walked up to me and said, "How many in your party?" I asked for a job application instead. He told me that I would have to talk to the manager. A large man with a brown mustache walked up to me and asked me what my problem was. I told him that I was there to apply for a job. The manager hired me immediately. It was weird, but I jumped out of my seat and told him that I was very excited to start. He told me that I would be starting tomorrow at 4 p.m. I thanked him politely and began walking out of the place when I realized I never got his name or number. I turned around, and both the boy and the manager were gone. Later that night, I was in bed on my laptop searching for what first jobs I was most likely to get as the new employee. The most likely ones were toilet management, aka bathroom cleaning, or table wiping and cleaning up the animatronics. I arrived at work 5 minutes early the next day, and I walked up to the entry desk and told the teenage girl that I needed to speak to the manager. She took me behind the counter and told me to wait outside the employee break room. She walked in, and a few minutes later came out with the manager. He finally introduced himself simply as Mark, and told me to take a seat inside his office. He asked me how old I was, and I told him I was 17. Without even asking what my name was, he reached into a locker and pulled out a uniform. He then sent me to the employee break room to get changed. On my way back, I peered in the bathrooms, and all I could do was cross my fingers that I wouldn't get toilet management. I walked back to his office, and he told me that my job would be to clean tables as well as wash and watch the animatronics. Guess I got lucky. I walked out of his office, and I took a rag and some spray from one of the cleaning rooms, and I began to wash the tables when the animatronics started to put on a show. This was my cue to go backstage. On my way backstage, I noticed there was a door with a sign that said "Special access needed, do not enter." I sat in a fold-up chair next to it, and waited for the show to end before I went out and pulled the animatronics backstage. I was told earlier that after shows, sometimes Chucky will glitch out, and the only way to stop him is to spray some water on him from this purple squirt bottle that they gave me. So I got to work. I grabbed a washcloth and I started wiping their faces, starting with the bear on the left side of the stage. Finally, I came up to Chucky, who was much dirtier than the others. I assumed that he was dirtier just because he was an older animatronic, and that maybe it was a buildup of dust and kids' dirty hands. I washed him the same as I did the others, and then I paused to re-wet the cloth. But when I got up, Chucky's head was facing me, and his creepily realistic eyes gazed blankly into mine. I stood there frozen for at least 2 minutes. I thought that maybe he wasn't fully turned off and assumed nothing of it. I sprayed his face with the purple squirt bottle like I was told, and I wiped his face quickly, and then I speed walked out of there. I didn't run because I was afraid the other workers might think I was a coward. I resumed cleaning the party tables, and time seemed to pass by quickly. Later that night, when everyone was starting to lock up, my supervisor told me that I could head home. I didn't know what to do with my uniform, so I took it off and just left it on the front desk. I walked home with only the moonlight to guide me. I got home around 10:45, and as I lay in my bed about to fall asleep, I heard something outside. I looked out my window at the forest in front of my house. It wasn't very well lit, but I could make out a strange figure. Suddenly, the shadowy figure started to walk towards my house. I ran and grabbed my phone, and I would be ready to call the police if the shadow got any closer. But when I looked back, it was gone. All that remained was a quiet squeaking sound. I wanted to run to my parents' room and tell them about what happened, until I realized that my mom was on a business trip, and my stepdad wasn't exactly the understanding type. So I just went back to bed and somehow I managed to fall back asleep. When I walked into Chuck E. Cheese the next day, everyone was looking at me weird. They were whispering as I walked by. One of the employees walked up to me and told me to get out while I can. After he said that, he ran out of the building. I assumed that it was all an elaborate prank that they were playing on me, the new guy. So I shook it off and walked backstage to where the animatronics were. A show would be starting soon. I began to watch the animatronics as normal when I noticed that Chucky was closer and was looking directly at me. Assuming that it was a glitch, I grabbed the purple spray bottle and I began spraying at his face. This only made it worse. The oddly realistic jaw was moving up and down in a chomping motion. I knocked on the arms out of curiosity. When I did, it didn't feel like there was plastic underneath the fur. It felt as if it was a real arm. In that moment, I didn't care what anybody else think. I ran. After I composed myself, I continued washing, and the day went on like normal. Until later that night, when I changed out of my uniform and found that there was nobody there to tell me to leave. Though I assumed that there was someone still here because the back lights were still on. I went home and immediately went to bed. I woke up in the middle of the night to hear a sound of a squeaking mouse. I looked outside and saw the Chuck E. Cheese animatronic standing on my porch, its eyes staring into mine. I assumed that this was the punchline of the whole prank. Well, this prank had gone too far. I was ready to call 911. Only, I turned around, and he was gone. Needless to say, I didn't get a wink of sleep for the rest of that night. Around 6 a.m. the next morning, I got a message from Mark.
Hey kid, it's Mark. Don't worry about coming into work tomorrow, okay? Just, take it easy. Bye.
I found this very odd, but honestly, I was just happy I didn't have to go to work. I went downstairs and I turned on the TV. There was a report of 6 missing teens, all from my neighborhood, that went out a few days ago, and a large search has been going on. Later that day, I walked to the mall around when work would normally start, because I wanted to know what was going on. Several police cars were surrounding the building. I asked one of the officers what was going on, and he told me that the Chucky animatronic was missing. I said nothing and walked away. I hung around the mall until night began to fall, and decided to take advantage of the day, and I walked home while the sun was still setting. When I got home, I curled up in bed and listened to the night sounds. Then, the birds and the crickets stopped.
Hey kid, it's Mark. I'm real sorry. If he doesn't get fed, then I'm sorry. You were a great kid, but to be honest with you, it needs to eat.
In the heat of the moment, I grabbed my baseball bat and I swung at it as hard as I could. And then I climbed out my window and I jumped. I ran as far from my house as I could. After what felt like an eternity, I was walking back to my house when I found that my neighbors were sitting on their front porch. Then, a comforting reminder popped into my mind as I realized that the older man owns a gun. I walked up to him and asked if he could go back to my house with me. He agreed and had his wife call 911. We decided to stay outside until police arrived. They found no one, but they agreed to have a police car stay for the night. The next morning when I was watching the news, I discovered that the bodies of the 6 missing teenagers were found, oddly enough, in their place of work, behind a door with a sign that said, "Special access needed, do not enter." The Chucky suit was never found. When I look back on it today, I realized that I was lucky. I could have ended up just like my coworkers, except sometimes, when I'm awake late at night, I can faintly hear the sound of a squeak.